Good evening, I'm Jose Cardenas. Tonight we'll meet award-winning journalist and author Elena Poniatowska. All this coming up straight ahead on Horizonte.
Funding for Horizonte is made possible by contributions by the Friends of Eight, members of your Arizona PBS station.
Thank you for joining us. This week, renowned French-born Mexican journalist and author Elena Poniatowska was in the Valley to kick off ASU's School of International Letter and Culture's Fall 2014 International Artist Lecture Series with her talk, We Can All Be Writers. Poniatowska's works focus on political and social issues facing those considered to be disenfranchised, especially the poor and women. In 2013, she won Spain's Premio Cervantes Literature Award, the most prestigious award for Spanish language literature. It recognizes an author's lifetime body of work. She became the fourth woman to receive such recognition. Here now is Elena Poniatowska. Senora Poniatowska, welcome to Horizonte.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for joining us. The jury that awarded you or made the decision to award you the Cervantes Award described you as one of the most powerful voices in Spanish language literature these days. Do you agree with that assessment?
Well, it's very difficult for me to agree because I would be presumiendo, boasting if I did. No, but for me it was a real joy to receive that prize and a real surprise also because I never expected it. So it was, well, and I think it was a good thing also for my country, no?
And yet you've received many awards over the course of your career, both from organizations in the United States. You've been recognized in Chile, in China, in Colombia, in many places. What is special about this particular award?
Well, it's called the Nobel Prize in Spanish. I mean, for Spanish speaking or Spanish writing people, no? And only very few women have won it, and I was the only one who could speak on top of un púlpito, ¿cómo se dice?
From a lectern?
Yes, because everyone, the women who had received it before, Maria Zambrano and Ana Maria Matute, they were in wheelchairs, they were old. Dulce Maria Loinas, they didn't even present themselves to receive the prize. And I went there, and it really was like a feast or a party because I took my 10 grandchildren, and then one of my last little granddaughter, Carmen, had a very charming conversation with the king because she asked him if he lived in a very big castle. And he said, yes, it's a very big castle. And then she said, well, why aren't you wearing your crown? And he said, oh, I have it here in my pocket. And then she said, is it a good thing? Is it nice to be a king? And he said, sometimes.
Speaking of the king, we just showed a picture on the screen of you with King Juan Carlos. And you're dressed in the indigenous clothing of the women of Oaxaca.
It's a dress that was given to me, I think 10 years or 12 years ago by the women of Juchitán. And they told me every time, it's a very, I think they did it themselves, it's a very lovely red dress. And it has also the colors of Spain. And they told me every time you get a prize or you receive a prize, you have to wear this dress. So I did.
And almost every time you are recognized in this fashion or when people comment on your work, they talked about the juxtaposition of your quote-unquote aristocratic background and the fact that most of your writing, both your journalism and your novela, your novels, focus on the poor and the oppressed.
Yes, I think because I wasn't born in Mexico. I came when I was 10 years old.
From France?
From France. My mother's name is Amor, Paula Amor. Well, Maria Dolores Amor, but they changed it because it sounded, Paula was better with Amor instead of Dolores de Amor. And we came.
And she was from an aristocratic family in Mexico that had left.
Also she came, yes, and she married this very attractive and very good-looking Polish prince who was the descendant of the last king of Poland, Stanislaw Augusto Poniatowski. So it's supposedly a royal family, you know.
And you had to learn Spanish. I understand you learned Spanish from the servants.
Yes, of course, in the streets. So I had a very peculiar Spanish during years, and I made lots of mistakes, I suppose, but it made me, this language brought me very near people, very near, especially the poor people in the streets.
And you were educated for a period of time in the United States.
Yes,
High
yes,
school,
that's
is that
why
right?
I'm able to speak English with you.
Let's-
By the nuns in a Sacred Heart convent in a little town called Torresdale in Philadelphia, a Sacred Heart convent, and the nuns were very, very nice. I don't know if the school was so good. I think I could have done better, but still they were very good people.
When you returned to Mexico, you began your career as a journalist at, I think, the age of 18, is that right?
No, I was 21.
So some of the stories are wrong, but you were very young.
I was very young, yes.
And you've continued to write for newspapers.
Yes, now I
Mexico.
continue. Yes, all I do, I think now, and especially now at my age, I'm 82, all I do is really is work or write. I can do nothing else because my children are already, they have their own family, they have their own children, no? So what I have to do is keep on writing, keep on walking.
You talked about journalists in your remarks in Spain, both I think on acceptance of your award and then in some other speeches you gave there. And you talked about how difficult that position is right now, particularly in Latin America.
To be a journalist in Latin America? Yes, it is because first of all, when I started being a journalist, you could never speak about poverty, because, for instance, Carlos Fuentes, you probably knew him, or
I know of him, certainly.
and Juan Rulfo, they got jobs when they were young, especially Carlos Fuentes, who was younger than Juan Rulfo. They got jobs as censors. There were so many movies made in Mexico, cowboys movies, because it was less expensive than in the States, no? John Wayne and all this, they came to Mexico and they were censors of these movies. And for instance, if a stray dog and a very thin, skinny dog went over the plateau or over the set, Fuentes used to say, or Rulfo, "Corte, stop, this dog denigrates Mexico." And they were paid for that. No, so at that time, I think there was a lot of censorship. The image we had to give of Mexico was the image given by Walt Disney, no? Tico Tico sí, Tico Tico now. Los Tres Caballeros, the free. I remember this movie with Carmen Miranda and this idea of Mexico with pineapples on your heads and women dancing and things like that, which doesn't exist anymore. But still, censorship exists. It's very difficult to criticize in my country, yes.
And
but I think it must be also very difficult to do it in the States. Especially intellectuals are asked to give their opinion on almost everything, no? And in the States, this doesn't exist. I don't think, for instance, Susan Sontag, who was a great woman writer, she was never asked to give an opinion of what the government was doing. And in Mexico, this happens with writers.
You mentioned in your remarks how dangerous it is to be a journalist because of the drug wars, among other things.
Yes, because of drugs. At the frontier, at the north, it's very dangerous to be a journalist because everyone knows you, and mostly, I think we are the most dangerous. We've been, ¿cómo se catalogado? How do you say it in English?
Cataloged?
Cataloged as the most dangerous country in the world for journalists. And I think that more than this year, not this year, but I mean the last 2 years, I think more than 78 journalists have been killed, especially men, and especially the ones who are linked, and women also, but especially men, the ones who are linked with drugs.
Now, you talked about the censorship, at least back in the early days when Mexico was very concerned about its image, and yet the work for which you are perhaps most famous for is one that portrayed Mexico in a very unflattering light. You wrote about the shootings of student protesters in the weeks before the 1968
Yes,
Olympics.
but that was many years ago, and it's a book called Massacre in Mexico, and it's about the killing of students in 1968, yes, the night of Tlatelolco, yes.
You wrote that at a time when it was not a good idea.
When it was forbidden, and when, yes, it was very difficult to have the book published, because even the publishing house received una amenaza.
Threats.
Threats, saying that they were going to put a bomb into the publishing house. And the head of this publishing house, called ERA, was a Catalan, Don Tomás Espresate. He said, I've been in the Civil War, in the Spanish
Spain.
Civil War. I've been in Spain. I know what bombs mean, and I'm willing to take the risk, and I'm not afraid of bombs, and this book is going to be published. And then afterwards there was this rumor all over the city, I don't think the country, but yes, the city, saying that the book was going to be picked up, confiscated in all the libraries. And this was very good propaganda for the book, because everyone wanted to get a copy before the army or the soldiers would come and get the book. So, and then I was offered a prize, saying that this book was the book of the year. And then of course I said, well, who's going to give a prize to the dead, no? To all the dead students.
You declined the prize. This was
I
what,
declined the prize,
1979,
yes,
I think?
I did.
And it was President Echevarria, I think, who offered it. He
It
had been
was
the Interior
Luis
Minister.
Echeverria, yes. And he was the Interior Minister during the killing.
Now, your version of events seemed to have been corroborated many, many years later. I think in 2001, there were disclosures of documents that were made public that seemed to corroborate your statements, or the version of events that you gave in your book, that the Mexican soldiers had fired on the students, and that the provocation had actually come from other Mexican undercover agents.
Yes, but you have to imagine, not to imagine, but this book is a book of voices. It's the voices of all the people who took part in this. Even the ones who got, the students who went to jail, who went to Lecumberri, El Palacio Negro de Lecumberri. So it's their voices, the voice of the students, the voices of the leaders, and even the voices of people against the students' movement, saying, why aren't the students in front of their desks studying? Why are they out there in the streets? So it was a huge collage of voices, and especially of the voices of many of the people and many of the students who were killed.
You talk about the voices of the people involved. Your writing has been described as testimonial writing, not just in that context, but in other books that you have written. Do you think that's an accurate description of your body of work?
Well, it is a writing that comes out of what people say or what people care about. I've written many stories. Now I've written stories like every other writer writes a story, using himself or using a friend or using whatever he thinks of life, But still, what I've done is really maybe because I wasn't born in Mexico, is to document my country. When I arrived as a girl, I remember I loved geography, and I saw a map of Mexico, and in this map I saw many pieces of land and that were said zones that have to be discovered, zonas por descubrir. So I said, imagine, because France is a country where every little piece of earth is cultivated, no? There's something on every piece of earth in France, but not in Mexico. So what I started to do is to try and know for myself, know my country the best I could, and then for others also. And there are still places in Mexico City that no one knows about. And people, especially people, indigenous people, that also no one knows about. Women, old people, and children.
And speaking of women, they tend to be at the forefront of many of your writings, including, you've written some stories about the women who fought in the Mexican Revolution, las soldaderas. And the thinking is that, or you've been described as very much a feminist writer.
Well, for instance, the soldaderas, the camp followers in Mexico, they were just considered almost prostitutes, no? Women who just followed soldiers or followed the troops. But I think that without them, there would have been absolutely no revolution, because they cooked for the man, they followed him, they slept with him, they took care of him, and when the man died, either maybe even could be a general, they would take the Mauser, they would shoot, and even they rode on horses, so they were very extraordinary women, and they were never taken into account. So that is why I have been so keen on giving women their place. Usually Mexican society easily forgets its women, easily. They know all about now Frida Kahlo, who's almost like the Virgin of Guadalupe, but they don't seem to know anything about women, no? And women have very little participation in, for instance, in politics. And when they do whatever men tell them, because it's the men who have brought them into power.
Excuse me. Speaking of women and politics, when you accepted the Cervantes Award, you commented on the women who were part of the Zapatista movement in Chiapas back in 1994, and you talked about what this meant to them.
Yes, because women, indigenous women, for instance, las indígenas, they said that they wanted to drive a car like the men did. They said, like their men or like the other soldiers, they said that they wanted to look in the eyes of the men they chose, not to be chosen or changed for alcohol, which happened before. They said they didn't want to be taken to the house of their foster, it's not foster parents, it's their los suegros. ¿Cómo es los suegros?
The in-laws.
Their what?
Their in-laws.
In-laws. And spend the night there. They said that they wanted to have the children they wanted to have, and that they could have, and that they could bring up. And they said, especially we want to drive a car like the men do. So it was a change. It was an enormous change, because women usually, they hide like this, they hide their face, they are always praying, they have about 10 children. It's a very difficult life for women in Mexico. And suddenly, for them to say things like that, it was almost like a miracle. No, it was so surprising and so touching, and it was, I think it was very important for women in Mexico, all kinds of women, rich women also.
Overall, do you think the lot of women in Mexico has improved in the years that you've been observing their situation?
Well, what improves any human being is education. What we need in Mexico most, of course, we need to be fed. We need not to feel hungry. We have to fight hunger. but mostly we need education. And if all women have education at the university, for instance, now, which is one of the biggest, you know it better than I, it's one of the biggest universities in this continent, and it's a good university also. There are many women in Filosofía y Letras, for instance, and women who stand out and are very extraordinary. But still, for instance, in politics, women have done nothing which is important.
Let me ask you about your views of the United States and its immigration policies. I read that a number of years ago when President Obama was recently elected, you expressed a great deal of hope about what that might mean for improving relations with Mexico, for immigration and so forth. He has come under a lot of criticism, most recently for postponing some immigration reforms that he had promised to make. What's your view now of the relationship between the United States and Mexico as regards immigration, Arizona in particular, and President Obama?
I think it's a very complex situation, especially for poor Mexicans, because now the Mexicans who are not received in the United States, who are kicked out, so to say, and go back, they all stay in Tijuana. And there's a big franja, a big, I don't know, una franja, a big fringe? No. A big, like an avenue of people.
Yes.
in, for instance, Tijuana, in all the towns at the border, of people who are waiting, who don't want, who are not capable to come back to their homes. And I think they are in a horrible situation. And they're very badly treated. They were badly treated, of course, when they were sent back by the Americans. And they're very badly treated by the Mexicans. And for instance, Mexicans have a reputation of treating also immigrants very badly, because of all the ones that come from Central America, Guatemala, El Salvador, they come on this train. You certainly have heard about it, the Beast, and well, now they won't let them go into on top of the roof, but they are treated by the Mexican authorities, the Mexican police, and the Mexican soldiers or whatever, the army. They are treated as, well, I think they say they're treated worse than the Americans treat the Mexicans.
We're almost out of time. Let me ask you about your lectures at ASU. You're going to talk about, I think the title of your speech or your lecture is, "We Can All Be Writers." Is that really true?
It's, in a way, it's true. Of course, if we work, we can all be writers if we really dedicate our time to it, and if we work. But I think writing is a way of expressing oneself. It's a way of speaking out. It's a way of observing. You have to look at what's happening, and you have to look at others. You have to look at people in the eyes. You have to watch, which is I don't know if it's a good word for this, but I think writing has to do with living. And when you live, you write down, you can very easily write down what you've seen during the day, at night, no?
You've written dozens of books.
Yes.
And I know this is a difficult question for any writer, but is there one in particular that's your favorite?
The one I'm going to write, or the one I'm writing right now.
Is that always the case?
It's always the case, because if I didn't love it or I didn't believe in it, I wouldn't do it. And I have to believe in it. I make myself believe in the book I'm writing, so to give it life and to push it out.
And we're almost out of time, but I know you're working on a book right now. Can you give us a preview of what it's about?
It's a book on Diego Rivera's, everyone speaks about Frida Kahlo, but there was another woman called Lupe Marin. She was Diego Rivera's second wife. Before Frida Kahlo, she bore him 2 daughters, Lupe and Ruth, who died of cancer. And I think she was an extraordinary person, because she wasn't a good woman. what one considers a good
But
woman.
this is a book about their relationship?
No, not about her relationship with Diego, but she wasn't a good mother. She wasn't a good wife. She wasn't good, which is very interesting.
Well, on that note, we're going to have to end the interview. I'm sorry we're out of time, but thank you so much for honoring us with
And
your
thank
presence
you for
here tonight.
inviting me. Thank you.
And that's our show for tonight. From all of us here at Horizonte and 8, thank you for watching. I'm Jose Cardenas. Have a good evening.
Funding for Horizonte is made possible by contributions by the Friends of 8, members of your Arizona PBS station.